All right, welcome. I know there's a couple more people getting in to the room, so we will just wait a few minutes to get everyone settled, and we will get started in just a second. Thank you for coming today. We're really excited for this conversation, and also for this homecoming week. It's going to be a lot of fun. So I do still see some people getting into the room. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. And as people continue to join, they can jump in and pick up where we are. But welcome to our Cats in the Corner office. We are going to record this session. So if you need to pop out or you want to watch it at a future date, you will be able to do that on our website, which is ArizonaAlumni.com. And again, my name is Lacey Niemeyer-John, and I am the Director of Alumni Career and Professional Development. And thanks to all the students, the alumni, faculty, staff, everyone who's joining us today for our special Cats in the Corner office conversation with alumna Danielle Glosser and Kathleen Rocky LaRose. Thank you, ladies, for being here, and we're going to hear about them in just a little bit. But this event is presented by our Arizona Alumni Career Lab, and the Career Lab looks to help our alumni navigate and manage their careers and build their professional networks. So for more information, you can go to ArizonaAlumni.com/career labs, and you can also follow us on Twitter at Arizona or Alumni Career Lab, their Twitter handle. So again, today's conversation is going to be recorded, and it will be archived on our website for on-demand viewing. But after the discussion, we will have an opportunity to do some Q&A with our panelists. So please go ahead and you can submit your questions to the question and answer feature on our webinar, and we'll get to as many as we can throughout the time that we have allotted for today. So before we jump into the meat of our program, I would also like to introduce Mr. Mark Acuna, who is the Senior Director of Alumni and Student Engagement. And Mark works closely with our Arizona Athletic Department and is the advisor for the Bobcat Senior Honorary Program on campus. So I want him to say a couple words and welcome our panelists as well as all of you to this program.
Thanks so much, Lacey, for that great introduction. I feel like I shouldn't even be speaking with these phenomenal women that are on this, including you, Asia and Lacey. But we are so excited to have people here. I'm looking through the participant list now and seeing a bunch of our chapter and club leaders, which is phenomenal. So thank you for always supporting Arizona alumni and the great stuff that we do. A big shout out for Lacey for putting all of this together, continuing to support our alumni through our career and professional development. So many great opportunities for you to stay involved, stay connected, especially like things this week. Happy homecoming. I should have started off that way. You can hear my voice. I'm already in homecoming mode. We're excited to see thousands of alumni come back. And so we're excited to really kick off homecoming with this phenomenal event. So first, thank you to our alums, some students, our members of the campus and local community who are here today via Zoom, checking this great, awesome opportunity. I think about Danielle and Rocky, the stories you could probably tell, the behind the scenes of athletics, the secrets behind the mask of the mascot. I mean, so many things that we could talk about. We'll keep it all professional today, but pretty excited to just learn some of the ins and outs. So again, welcome all for homecoming week. I'll tell you a little bit about our phenomenal programming with Cats in the Corner office. It's our online speaker series featuring highly accomplished University of Arizona alum and distinguished faculty and staff members. So we are honored today to have the great Rocky LaRose and Danielle Glosser, both Bobcats representing our alumni body, our community, the Wildcats for life, and both of them have given back so much to our university in so many different ways. From working here for a lifetime with Rocky to being on presidential events with Danielle. I mean, there's so many things that we could talk about all day long about the great accomplishments these women have had. As a quick side note, because Rocky is so amazing, in February, our East Valley Cats in Maricopa County will be honoring her at the Toast and Taste February 2023. Well, she'll be honored in front of many guests, many opportunities. It's also a scholarship fundraiser, so we'll be able to create more scholarship dollars for students coming from Maricopa County, where they will become Wildcats and not Sun Devils. So we want to send them south so they can continue the Wildcat tradition. So thank you again for all being here. A couple things to remember: join us, get involved. We have many of these events happening throughout the year. Join the Bear Down Network, find connections all across the country and the world. Bear Down Network is where you can mentor, connect, flash mentoring, build community, find people that you're looking for in all of your different areas that you're working, or if you want to change jobs, get connected in a different way. It's a great opportunity. So once again, thank you all for spending the first day of homecoming with us, and I will shoot it back to Lacey, but bear down and go Cats.
All right. Thank you, Mark. We appreciate you and your leadership and all your commitment and Wildcat spirit that you bring to our programs and to our alumni community. All right. Well, let's talk more about Rocky and Danielle. I have some wonderful bios here that I would love to read. So let me just bring up a screen here. I'm going to do some career highlights on Rocky and Danielle, just to give people a background if you don't know their amazing careers already. So let's start with Rocky. Rocky, you started out as a student athlete here. You were the starting infielder and cleanup hitter for the University of Arizona softball team, leading to their first conference title, and was the University of Arizona's homecoming queen as well, right? Nationally, she competed in the Sun City Saints team and won the USA Fast Pitch Softball National Championship and title, and went on to represent Team USA in the 1979 World Cup Softball Championships in Tokyo, Japan. So later in her career in 2009, Rocky LaRose became the first woman in Arizona and University of Arizona history to serve as the director of athletics for combined men's and women's intercollegiate program. Throughout most of her 35-year career, she was University of Arizona's chief operating officer, overseeing the internal operations, of the athletics department in all 20 sports, beginning the first woman in her capacity to have day-to-day operational responsibilities over Division I, 1A FBS football, men's basketball programs. Rocky went on to serve 3 times as the Pac-10 or Pac-12 conference vice president and served 25 years as a member of the Pac-10 or Pac-12 council, which governs all conference policies and sport regulations. She also served on the NCAA's management council and was a liaison to the NCAA Student Athlete Advisory Board. And she somewhat recently retired in 2014. But her career is not over. She is still making waves and doing amazing things. Rocky is an award-winning photographer and is represented by the #1 gallery here in Tucson, Arizona, the Madeiras Gallery. She picked up a camera years ago while traveling with the University of Arizona athletic teams and has never looked back. Her stunning images have been featured on various magazine and book covers and numerous articles, including Tucson Lifestyle, Wyoming Lifestyle, and she was the 2019 top finalist for Outdoor Photographers International Wildlife Image of the Year. So Rocky, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Yes. All right. Well, we have not one, but 2 amazing Wildcats in the room. So Danielle, I am going to advance the slide here and talk about you and your amazing career. So Danielle is the principal of Client Fundraiser, which is a business dedicated to helping artists to increase their client volume and visibility in their art. Since 2014, she has worked with over 200 artists over 20 states to support their professional goals. Danielle has been a guest speaker at the Smithsonian's historic Hirshhorn Museum, the Maryland Institute College of Art, and the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities and Art Table, which is a leading organization for professional women in visual arts. But her career started as a mascot here at the University of Arizona. We have a wonderful Wilma in-house, and which led to a job for the NBA's Golden State Warriors, where she was inspired to pursue a master's degree in sociology with an emphasis in race issues. So subsequently, Danielle has worked for an organizational development firm and served as a staffer for President Clinton's initiative on race at the White House, and was appointed the Director of Public Policy at the National Conference for Community and Justice before starting Client Raiser. So Danielle, thank you again for being here. We really appreciate you. Oh, let me unmute you real quick.
There we go. Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Perfect. All right. Well, I'm going to stop my screen here and let's dive into some questions about your careers and also the connections between not only you two amazing women, but also the connection between art and athletics. So let's start off first. I would love to hear a little bit more about your journey and maybe discuss any key decisions or events that maybe helped you get to where you are today. So, Rocky, do you want to maybe start us off?
Yes, I'd be glad to. Thank you. And I want to do a quick shout out to Mark and the East Valley Cats. I'm so honored to be their guest of honor. And I honestly, I can't wait. I look forward to seeing everybody in the Valley and Phoenix. I think that's in February. So it'll be coming up sooner than we think. And thank you, Lacey, for the invite. To have this conversation along with you and Danielle, two women that I greatly admire, is really, really a fun thing. And the U of A, where we love, right? So I'll be quick. My experience as a student athlete, I'll just be simple. It changed the course of my life forever. What an honor to have been part of that first generation of American women to step on the intercollegiate field of play. And that was in the 70s, which I know sounds a long time ago, but it was still within my lifetime. Thanks to the passage of Title IX, which by the way, this is the 50th anniversary of Title IX, which was passed in 1972. And I want to thank those, of course, who fought for equity in sports. So I am a Title IX baby. We used to say that in the day. And prior to 72, generations of women, actually all the women prior to 1972, were not allowed to play varsity sports. And then with the passage of Title IX, it was like a light switch turned on and suddenly women were allowed to play. And it made me aware as a young person, the importance of public policy and how it literally can change lives. So growing up pre-Title IX, I didn't have any visions or dreams of playing sports in high school or collegiate level because those opportunities simply didn't exist. All of my play was outside of educational institutions. But when Title IX passed during my high school years, we suddenly had opportunities. And with that, I was fortunate to be one of the first women to receive a full ride scholarship to play softball at the University of Arizona. And I can say one of my key decisions was having turned down a full ride to ASU. That was one of my key decisions. Excellent decision, by the way. But with that came new career goals. I mean, I had grown up wanting to be a nurse, just like probably a lot of the little girls back in the 1960s and 70s. We'd grow up to be a nurse. But after fainting during nurses training in one of the patients' room, I suddenly realized that might not be for me. And instead, I saw before me with this passage of Title IX and being allowed to play, I saw before me this athletic industry, something that I loved and believed in, but it was so new and so fresh for women back then that there weren't really any clear pathways that you could jump on. So I was fortunate, and sometimes fortune plays a key role in your career. But at the end of my senior year in college at the University of Arizona, the head coach position opened up. And I happened to be standing in the right place at the right time. And Dr. Mary Roby, who was head of the newly formed women's athletic department, asked me to be the interim head coach. And here's where I still have my stomach drop sometimes, because I was actually hesitated accepting that offer, as it was an interim job and I wanted something, more permanent. And sure enough, after the year was up, Mary and I both agreed coaching was not in the future for me. I sort of realized that that really wasn't a direction I wanted. We had a fun year, by the way. We had a great year, but sometimes knowing what you're not good at, right, leads to good things. And here's where the risks paid off. Dr. Roby then hired me as her assistant AD. And that sounds like a big deal, but there were just two of us. There was Mary and there was me and another part-time position. So taking the head coaching job was a key decision that led to my career in athletics. And, at the time, men and women's programs were separate entities on campus. And so when Sid Dempsey arrived, he merged the programs and suddenly there was whole other career road ahead of me. Now we had combined programs. And I knew for sure by then that that's what I wanted to do. And I set up a meeting with Dr. Dempsey and told him I wanted to do what he was doing. And that his mentoring allowed me and led me to the position of overseeing the day-to-day operations for both football and men's basketball and all our other varsity sports. So making that key decision to be the interim head softball coach, taking that risk led me to the most incredible career.
Oh, I love that. Right. And that step into the darkness sometimes, or you just don't know exactly where it's going to lead, but it sometimes is the game changer, let's say, to use a sports term, for our careers. So I love that example. Thank you for sharing that, Rocky. All right, Danielle, let's hear about your story.
Well, it really did start when I was Wilma, when I was 17 years old. And being here with you guys is like being back home. So it's really super to participate in this webinar today, especially with Rocky, who was a great influence on my career. So during college, I remember I wanted an internship at the Pac-10, and Rocky hooked me up and secured that for me, which then, led to more interest in working in the sports arena, which I wound up, as you mentioned, at the Golden State Warriors after college in the marketing department. And boy, the novelty of that experience wore off fast. I think I knew within that one season that working for a pro sports team was not for me. And I actually was always interested in race issues. At the time, I was working in inner city Oakland for the Boy Scouts, who had a program on topics for kids that they weren't necessarily learning at home. And this was during the Rodney King trial. So a lot was going on. And I had the opportunity to talk with Harry Edwards once, who's a very famous sports sociologist. He was the architect behind the Black Power movement at the 1968 Olympics. And I thought I wanted to do what he did, combine my interest of race and sports. And I spoke with him and he said, well, there's one PhD program in the country at Berkeley. And I was like, whoa, I don't want to get a PhD. And he said, well, maybe you can just study race issues under a sociologist. So I looked up all the departments around the country and wound up moving to DC to study sociology with an emphasis in race issues at George Washington University, which was what I consider my second career, because, leaving the sports world, it was kind of like a divorce because it was such a key decision to drop all that experience and interest that I had and move on. So while I was in grad school, I had an internship at what was then the National Conference of Christians and Jews. I worked for the DC chapter in Anacostia. And when I graduated, I then found a job with an organizational development firm that did what they called back then diversity training for Fortune 500 companies. So I was kind of behind the scenes and thought I wanted to be a diversity trainer. But again, changed my mind because I realized that really the people at the time that were the most effective were clinical psychologists, and I had no interest in that. I was too opinionated and really was more interested in telling people what to do than listening to them. So the big change maker for that position was when the FBI showed up at my house and wanted to interview me about my boss. So I realized then and there, oh, I think it's time to get a new job. And I was reading in the New York Times that President Clinton had set up an initiative on race issues with a very esteemed panel of people from different sectors across the country. So in the article was the CEO of the National Conference of Christians and Jews. He was quoted. So I went to my former boss at the nonprofit and I was like, do you think you could hook me up? And she said, I can do better than that. My board member actually works for President Clinton. So I was like, perfect. So she arranged a meeting for me. And this guy didn't even ask me one question during my interview. And at the end of the interview, I was like, well, don't you want to know anything about me? And he said, if Cheryl recommended you, that's good enough for me. And I was like, okay. So I wound up working at the White House on this special initiative for a year. And I then was asked to stay on to help write President Clinton's book on race issues, which no one ever heard of because of Monica Lewinsky. And that was the day I decided to leave, was when he became impeached. So another change maker there. Now, Clinton had pieced out separate segments of this initiative to different nonprofits. And I happened to work with a lot of religious leaders around the country during this time. So coincidentally, he gave the piece that I was working on to the national office of the nonprofit that I interned for in grad school. So long story short, I wound up back there and I became the director of public policy. We had 65 offices around the country, and I was responsible for shaping the public policies on race, religion, sexual orientation, gender, ability issues, ageism, all sorts of topics. And about 4 years in, I decided, okay, I'm ready to do something different. So let's have a baby. So I wound up having 2 kids and staying home with them for 10 years, which in retrospect, I'm not quite sure how I did that. But I helped my brother, who's a screenwriter in Hollywood, for a while doing research for some of his scripts. And one day I was on the porch reading his latest script, and I never liked anything he wrote because it was super violent and just not anything of interest to me. But this script I loved. I was just riveted by what he wrote. And it struck me in that moment, like, I want to do something again that I'm excited about aside from my kids. So I realized there was a job that had an intersection of race and film, and I interviewed for that job. It was insane. The process was like unlike anything I'd ever been through in my life, only to find out they were going to pay me $15 an hour. So I knew right then and there, another key decision, I need to start my own business. So I did a bunch of research, and Lacey, you'll love this. My idea for Client Raiser came to me while swimming at the local high school. So I'll stop there for the moment, but basically the past 8 years, I've worked with visual artists on their business development, and I help sell their work, and I do a lot of community workshops around DC and other areas.
Thank you, Danielle. And yes, I will connect with you on the power of swimming and how it can clear your mind. It's a great exercise. But another thing that I just loved from both of your journeys is that, you took risks, right? You maybe took a job that you didn't really know exactly what it was going to turn out to be. And sometimes it turned out and sometimes it didn't. And I just appreciate your vulnerability and authenticity of saying that wasn't for me, right? I'm not meant to be a marketer for a professional sports team, or I'm not meant to be a coach. But you found how your skills were going to be able to, truly serve others and lean into them to make amazing careers for yourself. So I appreciate that. Another theme that I just kind of picked up as you were talking were some of the mentors and the champions for your career that helped you in different places and points along that journey. And that's my next question. So Danielle, I know that your paths had crossed during your amazing career. So I would love to hear how the connection was made between you and Rocky, and tell us a little bit more about that experience. And then Rocky will get your take on it as well.
Sure. So I was in a sorority at U of A, and I remember being at a pledge meeting and everyone was complaining about something. And I was like, whatever. And I stood up and said, well, I decided today that I want to be Wilma the Wildcat. And one of the members of my pledge class, I believe, was the only freshman on the pom squad. And so literally a week later, she came up to me, Marissa Huxford, and she was like, you won't believe it, but they're looking for a new Wilma. And I was like, oh, great. So somehow she connected me to Rocky. And I remember that, there was no kind of process. It was just Rocky was like, okay, great, you're interested, you can do it. So for a year, I was Wilma, had a great time with my Wilbur, Bill Waynick, who I love, and the cheerleaders, and, did all the games and everything. And then one day my world came crashing down. Rocky called me to her office and she said, for legal reasons, we have to have tryouts. So after being Wilma for a year, I actually had to go through the whole process of trying out. And I remember Doug Tilford, who at the time worked for Rocky, was part of the panel of 7 people that interviewed me on why I wanted to be Wilma. I had to write an essay and I had to do a tryout at one of the games. So, I was fortunate because I had a leg up on the other contestants because I'd been doing it for a year. So luckily it worked out. And from there, like I mentioned, Rocky was instrumental in getting me my first internship at the Pac-10. And then beyond that, I don't know if she remembers this, but for years, she wrote me recommendations for jobs, because I kept switching around. I mean, she was always helpful in providing me with advice and then, helping me clench that next endeavor that I was pursuing.
Well, that's exactly how I remember it. A little different, actually. I mean, I don't know about legal, but it was the right thing to do to have tryouts. Wilma was so new. We had a donor. We always wanted a Wilma, but we hadn't been able to get there. And then we had a donor who would graciously supplied a costume, and it was in the middle of the season, and we needed somebody. So we actually had a staff member put it on for the first little bit. And then, yeah, Danielle, my goodness, to have a student walk in. I mean, this is something to remember, to have a student walk in and say, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. How do I do that? I mean, you see that in a young person and you say, I want to help that person. So it was great. Danielle stepped in, we had a Wilma, and then of course we had to go through the formal process later on.
I love it. I love it. And, both of you have so many, amazing different facets of your careers that, given you such a unique perspective. And each of your careers have, as you've described, really crossed these 2 different fields of art and sport. And so I would love to kind of shift the discussion and maybe talk a little bit about how you've applied your experiences in the athletics world, as well as in the artistic space and creative space, and how that really crafted your perspective and really crafted your careers. So Rocky, you were a standout athlete, an iconic leader in sports administration, but now you're also this gifted and acclaimed photographer. So tell us a little bit about that shift for you, and did your artist self ever come out when you were wearing your athletics hat, and how did you manage that? Oh, let's unmute you real quick, Rocky.
So yeah, that's a big question, but I'll say this, actually artists and athletes are similar in so many ways. And I don't know that we naturally think that, but they both make these huge sacrifices to what what they do to what they love, right? What they love to do. I mean, there's years of practice and there's fine tuning your skills, and it takes a lot of time. And to be great in those areas, not just good, but to be great in either field takes true dedication and sacrificing some of your other life's pleasures. And, you know, the good and the bad of that is, in the end, both artists and athletes may only, it may only be for their own self-satisfaction, right? Being truly successful in the field is hard to come by. I mean, oh, I got a call there. Is hard to come by. I mean, less than 1% in sports hit the pros or the Olympics, Lacey. There you go. I mean, it's a long journey. So, and yeah, art did show up in my career. We didn't have full-time photographers and videographers within the department during the early years, but we were very successful. We had all of our teams in postseason, and but we had no way to really document that success. So now it's a whole different story. We have multiple full-time, videographers and photographers in the department. But back then, I'd be on the road with the teams in postseason. And I don't know, I felt this urge to pick up a camera, and I became a very average sports photographer. And again, like I like to say, it's actually being a little selfish, right? It was calming my nerves from watching the game through a lens, rather than as an administrator sitting on the sideline, hearing comments, stressing over every play. It's a pun intended, but it did give me something else to focus on.
Thank you. I love that. And Danielle, what was your experience, right? Working in sports, being Wilma, talk about a different perspective. How did that help you in kind of your career today? And what are those similarities that you found?
Well, Rocky sent us to mascot camp once at UCLA, which was pretty phenomenal. And there is a lesson I learned there, which is the concept of yes and, which I guess they use a lot in improv, which I just learned recently, actually. So the idea is that, you take everything a step farther. So for example, when you're a mascot, you're trying to get the crowd excited, right? So you might, not just clap your hands or wave your hands, but, actually go into the crowd or do a dance or whatever, to get people more excited. And so I do feel that spirit has stuck with me throughout my career, because I'm always thinking about all the angles to squeeze every ounce out of everything for my clients right now. Like, I got a deal with Bloomingdale's last year. And so I, was looking at the marketing angle of how we can, get more publicity. And then I was thinking about the artists themselves. And in fact, I wound up at the end of the day asking Bloomingdale's to give them a discount on any clothes they wanted the day that we were there, because I figured, why not? So just different ways to look at opportunities and try to maximize them. In terms of the arts and athletic worlds, they are very similar in that they're extremely competitive. Obviously that's what athletes do, but likewise, artists are up for grants and residencies and to get representation. I mean, it's a very competitive environment. And I think both athletes and artists have to have a certain mindset in order to succeed, because, as Rocky mentioned, obviously there's a lot of practice, but there is a certain level of stamina that an artist has to have. And sometimes physically, if you're a sculptor that welds, I have a couple women that are out there with their torches all day long, and that, takes a toll on your body just as much as training for a competition. So I definitely see an intersection.
Sorry, finding my mute button there. Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, right? The physical as well as the mental approach to, the craft. And Rocky, I love how you brought up that sometimes it's not always for, the award or the championship or the win. It's just for the love of doing it. Right. And, maybe if you could, I'm going off script here a little bit, but maybe talk about that passion and why is passion so important in, bringing together or putting together performance, whether it's in sports or in art or in our everyday careers. How does that show up for you?
Well, first of all, I want to say that sport is a form of human art. I mean, athleticism is not just the physical abilities, it's the way a man or a woman or an athlete moves the human body. And athletes are performers, just as artists are performers. And I know we tend to designate that one comes from physicalness and one comes from the creative mind, but as Danielle mentioned, athletes, of course, require just as much mental acuity and mental creativity to be successful as artists need to be physical. And you need to be creative in sport. And trust me, our coaches are very creative with always coming up with new ideas. But it's that passion that drives you, right? It's the dedication. There's the goal. There's that carrot at the end. And, in our Department of Athletics, our mission is the pursuit of excellence. And that takes guts and it takes passion to move forward and to have competitiveness within yourself, to compete against yourself, to make yourself better. And I love that in people because that brings out the best in you, right?
Yeah, fantastic. Danielle, do you have any comments or thoughts on that too?
Just to add on to what Rocky said, I just think that it's important to note that passions can change, that people can also explore various passions at the same time. I have a client who's a phenomenal photographer. He's also a lead researcher at the National Institute of Health, and he's a triathlete. So he's the trifecta, but I think that people just have to be open to pursuing either different things at different times in their lives or everything at once if they're capable of doing that there's no right or wrong. Rocky had this very linear career that was extraordinary. And I feel like my career is like a mascot's, you kind of ping pong around the stadium and just see what sticks and what excites people. And that is where I've found my joy, is just trying out different things and seeing what sticks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what a great comparison. And, I love the analogy that you have there, that ping pong, but ultimately you both are successful. You both have amazing careers and are making an impact in the spheres in which you're at. And, it's that mind body connection, and whatever the arena, right? You can find success by leaning into those strengths and tapping into that passion. So I appreciate both of your thoughts on that. So we'll kind of keep moving here through the questions. But again, if anyone has questions in the audience, you can post them in the Q&A section and we'll get to as many as we can. Rocky, did you have another thought?
No, I'm good.
Okay, great. Well, let's keep moving on. Let's kind of dive into leadership, and because you both held leadership roles in your careers. And maybe we could talk about, how do you define leadership within your careers, and maybe leadership for yourself? Rocky, do you want to kick us off here?
Sure.
And then Danielle, we can dive into it.
Sure. It's a little hard because, I can tell you what I aspired to be, and I hope those that I worked with would agree with that, right? I tried to be, athletics is a people person. It's about young people, it's about education, it's about coaches that are under a lot of stress and pressure. And so I tried to be, I guess, technically what you would call a relational leader, one that encourages and empowers people. You have to have empathy for others to know where they're at and to truly care about that individual to get the best out of them. And that's what sport is about, is getting the best out of you, whether it's physically or mentally or whatever. So I clearly thought of people as working with me, not for me. And, you want to treat people as individuals and connect and adapt, right? Your leadership style to that person. And I think it's especially important in athletics, as I'm sure it is in many fields. But, just think a football coach versus a gymnastics coach. I mean, those are two different people that had two different goals. Gymnastics is very creative and football is very powerful. And, so is gymnastics. You got to have that core strength to do what you do. But the coaches themselves have very different mentalities. So you have to look at them as individuals. And then, being the first woman to oversee day-to-day operations for football and men's basketball, I knew that autocratic top-down kind of thing wasn't going to work, right? I mean, coaches are like, they're the franchise owners of their own little team. And as administrators, we're the corporate office. And so I needed to be a facilitator of their needs. How can I help them be successful? You need to be part of the team. You need to become one of them. And I have a word that I use, but I think people sometimes misinterpret it. But I think the best way to do that is to infiltrate. And I don't mean like from a militaristic kind of sense, but you need to get inside the circle and you need to be someone they see as part of the effort. And so, every day in my career, I worked with elite coaches and student athletes who believed in being the very best that they could be and striving for that excellence. And so this is about understanding the individual you're working for. I mean, being a coach at an elite level is very isolating, and coaches and teams tend to isolate themselves from the outside world because there's a lot of stress and there's a lot of criticism. So you need to be that safe place. Not somebody who's always saying no, but rather get inside the circle, help them build their successes, be their sounding board. And like I used to say, perhaps I'm your Lucy from Charlie Brown, where you pay me a nickel for advice.
I love that, but I think your advice would probably be worth more than a nickel, Rocky. All right, Danielle, I'm hearing a lot of similarities, but why don't you kind of describe maybe what leadership looks like for you in your role working with so many creative artists and also leaders, even at like the government level. So.
Well, my experience has been so different because I've actually never managed another person. Like whatever I have been a part of has been like a solopreneur experience. So I tend to approach things more from like a hustler's point of view. Like I'm always out there making something happen. And it's similar to being a mascot now that I think about it, because no one knows who you are and you're out there like getting all these people riled up. And likewise, I would do the same thing in my career. For example, one time there was this big conference in South Africa on race issues, and I wanted to go. Like I was going to be there no matter what. But I had to get President Clinton to appoint my CEO to be on this team. So I was on a mission, and for a year, like I was focused on, pulling all the strings I could. So it did happen, but my CEO's mother died the day before we were supposed to go, which was sad in many fronts. Anyhow, right now I feel like, working with me for my clients, it's like having a cheerleader on their team, because my goals are their goals, whatever they're trying to accomplish. If they want to be in a museum, great, like that's what we're going to focus on. Or if they're trying to just make more sales, I'm just there to help them figure out what action items to take in order to bolster their careers and reach their goals. So in sum, I think that my work has been, more on the sidelines than in the game, so to speak. But I don't seek the spotlight that way. Like that's not what drives me. Like I want to be a part of the team. Like I want to be invited to the after party. Like that's what's important to me.
Yeah, I love that you're both mentioning, team and partnership and relationships, and what an interesting take on leadership, right? When we usually, the stereotypical leader is that, person with the top-down approach. But I love hearing your collaborative approach, relational approach to leading either ourselves, others, or an industry, right? I think that's so important.
I just want to add one other little story. This is probably one of the biggest compliments of my life happened last year. I was applying for something in DC, and I had to have one of my clients write me a recommendation. And she's probably my most, prestigious client on my roster. She just got back from the Venice Biennale. She's won all these grants from around the world. And she wrote in there, while all these companies are out there with their signs and their commercials about, Black Lives Matter. Here's Danielle working quietly to actually create opportunities for her Black clients. So I felt like that just meant the world to me, because that's truly what I'm trying to accomplish here.
Beautiful. Thank you, Danielle, for sharing that. So to kind of continue on, we're going to be wrapping up soon, but I know that, your careers were not always this wonderful golden path that was, paved nice and neat for you. As athletes, artists, leaders, even cancer survivors, right? You faced your fair share of challenges. Maybe you could share quickly on maybe how some of these challenges that you faced throughout your personal and professional lives really impacted your career and your perspective today. Rocky, do you want to kick us off again?
Sure. Wow. So yeah, I see two parts to that question, particularly for me, and that's entering a space where women had never been before, right? Football and men's basketball. And then second, being a two-time cancer survivor and how that shapes your thinking and your life after diagnosis. And, I mentioned earlier the infiltrate part of becoming part of the team and facilitating their needs. But there are times in life where you're just not asked to join. And how do you integrate yourself? And how do you become a part of the team? And, you've got to gain their trust. And I'm talking about coaches here. You have to follow through on what you said you were going to do. You have to, being there when they need you, being honest and setting clear expectations, right? And being upfront about the situation. I mean, no woman ever had day-to-day oversight for football, men's basketball. So how is this going to work? Actually, I have to say it started out with a lot of joking, like, well, this is awkward, especially walking into a football locker room for the first time, being a woman and walking in after the game and, but it's that banter that kind of helps build the connection. Right. The other was to just, to set the ground rules, so to speak. I mean, both coaches I worked with at that early days, they knew I wasn't there to analyze their game plans or critique their practices. Right. That's what we hired them for. Now, okay, we may be judging the outcomes, but joking about changing their game plans, being upfront, and I remember telling him, I may not know the specific plays of a tight end or a running back, but, I'm here to give them the tools that you need to be successful. I'm here to solve those off court, those off the field needs so that you can focus 100% on coaching and to help them and the team become as successful as they are. But regarding cancer diagnosis, I mean, you learn pretty quickly in the halls of cancer land that cancer is an equalizer and there's no difference between men and women. And, if you don't know if you will live a day or a month or 10 years, that is a powerful, powerful thing. And I remember when I came back from chemotherapy and came back to work, I was so overwhelmed by the compassion from friends and family and complete strangers and medical personnel. I mean, wow, are they not the heroes? I found myself even more empathetic and even more compassionate to those I worked with and were around. And I guess you could say from an athletic standpoint, compassion on steroids, so to speak. But, if a coach came in and she said she had a hangnail, I mean, I would tear up. So, in all seriousness, it changed me profoundly, but in a good way. New ways of looking at everything, including, what we do in athletics is not life or death. We are about developing young lives. We are about educating young people, and life is short. So let's enjoy the ride.
I love that. Thank you, Rocky. Danielle, what has been your, life-changing moments and how have you overcome some of the challenges in your career?
Well, personally, I live with two cancer survivors, my husband and my son. And similar to what Rocky said, my bar is just kind of different about what's critical and serious. Like, no one's going to die if they don't get their piece of art on time, or if an artist is having a problem or whatever. So for a long time, I couldn't relate to a lot of what other people were going through. It took me a while to, have that type of compassion for something that just didn't feel as serious. I mean, when you're living in a life or death situation for years on end, it takes a toll. And I think part of my survival tactic was I became like a warrior. Like I was just so laser focused and really just had to keep everything at bay in order to survive myself. One tactic I used was I literally had a list of everything I was grateful for that I just referred to constantly. Like, we live in the United States, we're in a big city that has great doctors, and we have financial means to take care of this. My child never presented as sick. He never acted sick, looked sick. He of course would get sick, but then he would laugh. So like those types of things make a huge difference. And then on the professional front, in terms of managing challenges, like Rocky was saying, I use humor a lot. Like, my clients know that I don't sugarcoat anything. Like, I'm going to tell you that your website's antiquated and you need a new one, or better yet, we got to take that down because what if someone sees it, So, and they'll see the results. I mean, one time I have a sculptor who's phenomenal. He does commissions for the Rockefellers and some other high-end things he's done in his career. And when I met him, he showed me his business card and I was like, what are you, an accountant? I mean, this is terrible. So just interjecting humor can, take a lot of pressure off. So he did change his business card, and a month later he was offered a solo show, which is a big deal. So I think just to look at what part of a situation you can capture with, again, a sense of humor and make light of can take you a long way.
Yeah, like you both mentioned, right? That reframing of that challenge, and whether it's reframing to look at the people and the support, that you have around you, or, adding that little injection of humor to, keep those priorities in line. And yeah, I love that. And I think that's applicable to all of our challenges, right? Whether we are facing life or death situations or just the day-to-day stress of our careers and personal lives. So I appreciate those strategies. Thank you.
I just have to interject one story. Once I got in trouble with the chief of staff at the White House because what it looked like was that I had asked this American Indian chief to move so Jesse Jackson could sit down. And I was like, let's look at this for real, people. Like, just kind of played it off in a humorous way. And then, obviously they were like, okay, yeah, I guess you really didn't do that. I'm like, no, I didn't do that.
Oh my gosh. Well, we're coming up on time here, but I wanted to get one of these questions. We've had some amazing questions submitted from registration as well as throughout today, but we only have time for about one of them. But I'm going to choose this one because I think it's just a fantastic question. So Chris asked, I had an amazing experience at the University of Arizona as both a student and a mascot. So what did each of you feel that makes the U of A such a unique and rewarding place compared to other colleges and universities to go to school, participate in athletics programs, and work at the university? So what makes the university so special? Go ahead, Danielle.
That's the people. I mean, come on. The Wildcats are the best people ever. I mean, everyone I know that went there is just like phenomenal. When you see what people are doing for the community or in their careers or with their families, I really think it just comes down to the special people that go there, the friendships that are made, and the opportunities people give each other. It really, that's easy.
Yep, it is easy. I mean, and then you add in the Tucson community and the mountains and the sunshine and all of that. I mean, when I was there and now to this day, the athletic department is a family. And I know people think, oh, well, you use that term a little too much. And, but Lacey can vouch for me. I mean, we were all in McHale Center. Everybody knew one another. The cheerleaders and the spirit squads and all of that were included in everything that we did. And yeah, it was just a really super sweet time. And I owe everything to the University of Arizona. Bear down. It's who I am and who I always aspired to be and what I love.
Yes, bear down and go Cats, right? And it is such a pleasure. I'm going to inject myself in here to this question because I get one of the funnest jobs of working with our alumni and students and making those connections possible through mentorship or careers. And Danielle and Rocky, you're absolutely right. There is a family feel with our Wildcat community, and we're so grateful for everyone who contributes to it and keeps on those traditions. So thank you. And Rocky, Danielle, thank you so much for being here today. Is there any other final thoughts that you would have for our students, alumni, faculty, staff, Wildcat friends that might be on the call today? Danielle, I'll let you go first.
Well, just with especially the young people on the call, I think, U of A is such a tremendous resource. And I know that I certainly did not tap into all that was offered while I was there. So I definitely think to, use your advisor and the Career Center and the Mentor Society that Lacey runs and your friendships, just to hold on to those, because there is no time of life that's like college. And, some of my best friends in the world are listening in right now because I, bothered them like, you have to chime in here when I'm going to be on this webinar. But it's just such an incredible place, and to take advantage of the community like Rocky mentioned and the natural setting, it use those years wisely just to really dig in and experience everything you can.
Wow, I agree with all of that, Danielle. And I would also say, make sure you're making an impression, because you never know who you're going to come across that might help you along the way. I mean, if I hadn't gotten to know Dr. Mary Roby as a student, would she have ever asked me to be the interim head softball coach? I mean, you just never know who you're connecting with and where that might lead you. And then finally, just on a personal note, someone once said, you need work, right? It gives you purpose and a sense of accomplishment, but get a full life, get a professional life, get another life too, a life full of joy and passion, full of art, right, Danielle? Full of art,
Right.
Full of love and laughs. And, just remember, life is not measured by the breaths you take, but moments that take your breath away. So just remember that.
Oh, I love it. What a wonderful way to end this session. And I did want to share some very, very timely pictures of Danielle and Rocky as we close out this conversation throughout the years. Just to reemphasize what both Danielle and Rocky have said, make those Wildcat connections, because you just never know how they will impact your life and your career moving forward. So, and then finally, here we have our Bear Down Network. And thank you again for everyone on the call today. Danielle, Rocky, appreciate your insights and advice. And for all of our alumni, students, Wildcat friends, and also Asia for being on the back end helping me. We appreciate you all and hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and look forward to seeing everyone at homecoming or any other events in the future. Thank you. Bear down and go Cats.
Bear down. Thank you, Lacey. Thank you, Danielle. Asia.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.